This is Ragnall for Boxing UK, here with Ariel Helwani. How you doing, mate?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. I've heard quite a bit about you, seen you around, and let's talk boxing, let's talk wrestling, let's talk UFC.
All right, cool. I'm in.
Just to let the people know, what was the first passion in combat? What came to you first?
Like when I was a kid, I was first enamored with pro wrestling. I remember watching WrestleMania 1. I'm born in 1982. WrestleMania 1 was 1985. I probably watched it in like 86 or 87. And then like really fell in love with, all the characters. My favorite was Bret Hart. But, Hulk Hogan, Andre the Giant, the Iron Sheik, all those guys. And then, of course, over time, boxing and then MMA once the UFC started in the mid-90s.
And of course, right now we're here today in London. What brings you over? Because of course we've got the WWE event tomorrow, we've got the Zhang Joyce card presser today. What's your purpose here today?
I'm here, initially I was here for the WWE Money in the Bank event, which is happening on BT Sport Box Office on Saturday. But then this press conference came about, and like I said, I love boxing, and they were kind enough to let me cover this as well. So it's been great getting a chance to talk to Joe Joyce for the first time, Frank Warren for the first time in person. Really lovely stuff. And I love doing, I don't feel like you need to be one thing. If you are knowledgeable and prepared and researched, you can be whatever you want to be and cover whatever you want to cover.
And of course, this is a rematch for Joyce and Zhang. I'm sure you watched the first fight out. How do you think the second fight's going to go, and what are your thoughts to Joe Joyce to correct?
I think we'll see a much better version of Joe Joyce the second time around. I think he underestimated Zhang. I think Zhang is a great fighter, and that was the best version of him possible. And I think we're going to find out a lot about Joe Joyce on September 23rd. This is a really important fight for him and his legacy. All those big fights that we were talking about that he was going to get if he won in April, they all evaporate if he loses this fight in September. So there's a lot at stake, a lot of pressure on him, and I'm curious to see if he rises to the occasion.
And of course, we're in the United Kingdom, home of the heavyweights. We've got the likes of Joyce, AJ, we've got the likes of Tyson Fury, Dylan White. What's been spoken about as of late is Saudi Arabia, Tyson Fury, Alexander Usyk. What are your thoughts on that whole four-man tournament they've spoken of, whether it happens or not?
I mean, I'm just a little bit annoyed because it feels like we're being teased. I want to see the fights happen. We're seeing unification bouts monthly in boxing, sometimes weekly. We're seeing the 35ers fight. We're seeing the 40-pounders fight. We're seeing Crawford Spence at 47. We're seeing all the women fight, and we're not seeing the heavyweights fight, who are not getting any younger. And this is the best crop of talent at heavyweight since the 90s. So I would like to see them get on the horse. We're getting this fight. We're getting Dubois and Usyk in August. So hopefully that leads to us seeing Wilder, Andy Ruiz, Joshua, Fury back before the end of the year.
Just talking on undisputed and lightweights, of course it's been long awaited. Terence Crawford, Errol Spence, that fight is happening end of next month. What are your thoughts on that fight?
I love that fight. I love the fact that they finally made the fight. In the end, I favor Terence. I think he's the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world right now. But I think it's going to be a really fun fight, and we're probably going to get two because they both have rematch clauses. So that's fun. It's shades of the 80s with the Four Kings. The welterweights for the long time, best division in boxing, and certainly up there still. But I favor Crawford, and I just love the fact that we're getting it because it was starting to feel like one of those fights that we were never going to get. And again, another one of those big fights this year in boxing that we're getting, and with more to come. With CANELO now signing with PBC, we're going to get some big fights there as well. So very exciting stuff.
Just talking on the PB side of things, I believe in the same week out in Japan, we've got Inoue versus Stephen Fulton, unification fight. How do you see that one going?
Inoue is in the top 3 or 5 pound for pound. He's incredible. I love his midweek cards in Japan. Those are a lot of fun. You wake up and you watch those. He's an incredible fighter. Reminds me a little bit of a Demetrius Johnson in MMA, in that he's so good. He's small and maybe doesn't get the respect that he deserves because he doesn't have the biggest names to fight. So this is a big name for him to fight. It's a big opportunity for him to showcase his talents against like a very well-known and respected fighter. And again, another big fight that is being made. Promoters are working together. It's a great time. To me, boxing is very interesting, at times more interesting than MMA these days, except for the heavyweights.
Just calling on another boxing topic. The PBC recently signed for a free fight deal Canelo Alvarez. Now, of course, Canelo has fought on a string of the zone shows over the last couple of years. Is this something to look forward to? How big can this be for Canelo's career, especially the latter part?
This is incredible. I mean, he could have stayed with MATCHROOM in the zone and, fought the John Ryders of the world, and I don't think anyone would have really hated on him for that, but that was not interesting. So at this stage of his career, where he has nothing to really gain anymore except for just make a boatload of money, he's going to the place where he could get the toughest and biggest fights. How could you not respect that? So it's likely Charlo next, then maybe Benavidez, then maybe Morrell, then maybe Spence. I know it's 3 fights, but like there's a lot of options for him, and good, interesting, tough options, not just fights to sell out stadiums. So I love it, and again, how could you not have respect for a guy who, at this stage, with his legacy already intact, who's going out there and fighting the best, and he's been doing that from the beginning of his career, always trying to fight the best, even when he was younger and less proven. So I'm a big fan of Canelo, and on top of that, very active. Like, he's averaging, like 2 fights a year, and some of these guys aren't even fighting once a year. So again, how could you not love that?
Some are fighting once in 2 years.
Yeah.
The rematch with Dimitri Bivol, was that something that you were not too keen on looking forward to again?
No, I wasn't really interested in that fight, especially not at that weight. Same reason I wasn't interested, or I'm not interested as much in the Katie Taylor-Chantel Cameron fight at 140, just because I don't think it's like a great fight for the champ. And so, maybe if it happened at 168, it would be a little bit more interesting. But I personally would rather see Dimitri Bivol fight Artur Beterbiev if Beterbiev gets by Smith in a couple months in Quebec. So I don't want anything to hold that up, because that to me is a much more interesting and fresh matchup. And now we get to see Canelo. Like, I think this worked out perfectly, because I didn't really want to see the Bivol-Canelo fight again. We saw it once, all good. I'd rather see Canelo Benavidez, to be honest. Like, that to me is like the most interesting fight for Canelo, and that would likely only happen with PBC. So this is great.
And just switching over to the combats, of course, tomorrow, as you said, not tomorrow, on Saturday, we have Money in the Bank pay-per-view. Do you think a particular Tyson Fury might be in the crowd looking to have his involvement?
He seems to show up anytime WWE is in town, which is great. But ultimately, we saw it, like we've seen it. I want to see him box or fight Francis Ngannou. That would be fun. But yeah, he's usually involved when they're in the UK. So I don't have any inside info, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's involved again.
And just touching on the WWE, of course, Money in the Bank, the winner does get that contract to fight at any time for the title. Who do you think is picking up that briefcase on Saturday night?
If I had to make a prediction, I think it's either going to be on the men's side of things, Logan Paul or LA Knight. LA Knight is very, very popular right now and is on a roll. I feel like they might try to, utilize Logan Paul, maybe some help from KSI. They're here in the UK. That would make a lot of sense. So I think it's a fun couple options that they have. And then on the women's side of things, I wouldn't be surprised if it's either Io Sky or Becky Lynch. Those are 2 great options for them. Sky has been great. Becky potentially against Rhea Ripley. That would be a big match as well. So there's some fun options there too.
As lastly, to cover the third final base, MMA. Now, of course, John Jones had that impressive win over Gain, put himself to the #1 pound for pound. But we still have the likes of Islam Makhachev, who is currently on the scene. Who do you call your #1 pound for pound in UFC?
It's a very tough question. It's very subjective and debatable. I lean towards Volkanovski. If you have Volkanovski 1, if you have Islam 1, that's cool. If you have John Jones 1, it's one of those 3 guys. Volkanovski is so active, and he moved up, which I love. John hadn't fought in 3 years. I don't think he fought the best heavyweight, but certainly up there, Cyril Gane. And then Islam is undefeated and beat Volkanovski, although it was a very close fight. So to me, it's like 1A, 1B, 1C. If I had to pick one, I'd pick Volkanovski or John, and really, it's 6 in one, half dozen in the other.
Can either Francis Ngannou or John Jones put a dent in the Gypsy King if they were ever to step in the boxing ring? Could they cause some trouble?
Yeah, they could cause some trouble. Could they ultimately win? I don't know. But, Conor caused some trouble against Floyd. It would be fascinating theater. I don't know if it happens. I lean towards no at the moment. But, yeah, I think they can hang for sure. They're incredibly talented and athletic individuals.
And lastly, just to round it up, what are your thoughts on the YouTuber boxing scene? The KSI, the Jake Pauls, the Tommy Furies. How influential and positively impactful have you think that's been on the boxing world?
I think it's been great. I think there's been a trickle-down effect. I think fans are learning about boxing as a result of those guys. Like, new fans are coming in. They obviously take it seriously. They obviously train and respect the craft. And they're not going in there, for the most part, fighting guys who are 20-0, 30-0. They're fighting people who are close to them in experience. I think Jake Paul versus KSI would be a gigantic fight. I would love to see that fight. I think it would sell out Wembley. And so I'm not a huge fan of like when it gets like too wacky, when it's two guys who are like 500 pounds fighting each other, or this tag team stuff. That to me is like pro wrestling. Like there's pro wrestling for a reason. So I would rather keep it to that. But as far as like the other influencer stuff, I have no problem with it.
KSI, Jake Paul, who you go with?
Who do I pick in the fight?
Yeah.
I think you would have to lean towards Jake just because he's fought tougher competition. I think the jury's still out on KSI. I think it would be a fun fight. I think it would be a close fight. But if I'm forced to make a prediction right now, I would probably lean towards Jake just because of what we've seen from him over the last couple of years.
Even despite he's lost to Tommy Fury?
Yeah, but Tommy Fury is better than anyone that KSI has fought, including Joe Fournier. So, in my opinion, at least. So, and then like Anderson Silva and Tyron Woodley and Ben Askren, those are all better fighters than the guys KSI has fought. That's no knock on KSI. You're only as good as your competition. So we get to see. Let's see what happens if KSI fights Tommy later on this year.
Very much for your time, Ariel. Enjoy that one.
Cheers.